The Gabbard Solar Patrol program is a heliophysics program aimed at citizen scientists and K through 12 students, both locally, nationally, and throughout the world. The goal of Gabbard Solar Patrol is to monitor active regions on the sun in order to understand how they're connected to explosive events that we categorize under space weather. Participants can remote in and actually control the telescope themselves. So a common observing mode with the Gabbard Solar Patrol is that we'll have classrooms actually operate the telescope themselves, collect some data, and then generate maps of what the sun looks like at radio frequencies. They're gaining a really unique experience that I think is really special to the Gabbard program. And that's the ability to walk through the scientific process from the very beginning, from the steps of collecting the data themselves, all the way to reducing that data and interpreting scientific results from their studies. I get excited anytime I get to operate a radio telescope, and so I really enjoy it when other people get to have that same opportunity and that same learning process.
We are back for another install on day 3 on the Astronomical League Convention of the 2024 edition that's being held in Overland Park, Kansas. And with us right now is Jena Dunham. She's sitting there with Kent Marks from Explore Scientific. And Kent, I'm going to turn it over to you. Radio astronomy is fascinating, and it's something that also amateur astronomers can do. So
thank you, Scott. So this is something I'm aware of because ham radio operators use the ionosphere to bounce radio signals off the Earth and off the atmosphere to gain distance, right? So it's not just line of sight, and it's not radio astronomy where they use dishes to look at objects in a different wavelength of them. The magnetic spectrum that our eyes can't see. This is about using radio waves to bounce off of stuff and talk to other people. So it's sort of fun to stand here and just ignore this thing on the table in front of us. It looks like we're going to poke our eyes out, but this is an antenna. Jena is an interesting case study of generational astronomy here in Kansas City. And I'll let her tell you a little bit more about that and how that astronomy led into ham radio and astronomy.
Yeah, great. So nice to see you all from Kansas City. My name is Jena Dunham, and today I was here at ALCon 24, and we did a talk today, Mitch, Neil, and myself, about ham radio. And so many years ago, I got my start in the 80s when I went to Powell Observatory, and I was familiar then with astronomy as a whole. And it wasn't until 2010 when I met my husband then and his father and learned all about amateur radio. And amateur radio is really neat because we can use antennas like this one that's in front of us, and we could point it up to the sky. And if the timing is right, we could theoretically talk to an astronaut on the space station. And how cool is that? Who wouldn't want to do that, right? So you can actually make contact with them. And almost anyone can do that. It's so accessible. So that's one of the most exciting things about this. This can be something that anyone can do.
And that is pretty cool that, do you just CQ space station and they answer? Or what does that look like? Do you have to schedule it with them, or is it literally just sort of knock on their door and maybe they answer?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to go about it. One way is, obviously you have to have your license to start. So there is that to be legal. But you take your antenna, you go outside, you have already maybe looked at the schedule for the ISS, so you can expect them to come overhead, and you put the antenna up and their direction, and you just call for them using their call sign and use your call sign. And if you're lucky and the crew is available, they will pick up. And in the video that we had today in our talk, gentleman that picked up, astronaut Woody, he said, "Welcome aboard to the space station," to the ham radio operator who was calling him. They exchanged call signs, and it's very brief when you do it that way. So a couple of seconds and you're done, but you've made contact. Another way to do it is you could actually schedule something with your educational agency, organization, what have you, Boy Scouts or the school, and they can spend about a year preparing for that, learning for that, getting the kids ready for what that experience will be like. And then they can actually have maybe a longer time frame. Maybe it'll be 10 minutes or so, give or take a little bit, depending on how much time you have before you lose contact with the space station. And they can ask questions to the mic, and the astronaut can actually have a few minutes to respond back to those questions. So that's
Cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool right there. You know, it's not the next best thing to be in there, but it's pretty cool to be able to know that you're talking to those people going 300 miles up and going 17,500 miles an hour somewhere to the east, right? You also use astronomy kind of stuff, you know, to bounce signals, right? So you can reach farther away than line of sight. As we're talking, you can bounce signals off the moon. The moon is a good reflector for radio waves. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I will admit that I am an amateur in all respects. So there's people out there whose entire career is just these little pieces of information that we're talking about. Keep that in mind. There is so much more out there than one can learn. But generally speaking, you could, if you had the right setup, the right equipment, the right licensure and timing, you could aim your antenna at the moon, at an asteroid, a meteor. You can aim it at planets. So even the space station obviously is there. And I think as we move forward into the future, that we will see additional abilities to communicate with the Lunar Gateway and possibly with Mars.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, and you, something you just said makes me go back to, you know, something I hadn't thought about in a long time, but meteors, if you have an old radio that's not a digital radio, you can tune you like your car radio. My dad and I would sit out in the car and he would tune the radio to a frequency where there wasn't anything during meteor showers. And every once in a while you'd hear some music, and it was reflecting off the ionized tail of the meteor, and the radio station was distant, was coming down, you know, in Clarksville, Arkansas, you know, and we were able to just hear little snippets of stations that were a long ways away because their signal was going out in space and was being reflected back down by the ionization of the tail of a meteor.
Yeah, and the ionosphere changes with the sun and things like that,
Right.
with the time of day, with weather and different things. You have to take all that stuff into account as well. But yeah, you're right. The ionosphere and different things like that can be used to make that skip, which means that you could actually communicate around the world or hear things further away than you otherwise normally would be.
And we're going into solar maximum, lots of sunspots. That affects things.
Yes, it does.
Is that good or is that bad that we're going into a solar maximum for ham radio operators?
Well, some people would say that that is, well, you feel both, I think. Some people think that that's really interesting to listen to look at, to watch, to be a part of that. And they really follow those every single day. But then there's other people who will notice that there's more possibly disruptions happening and things like that as well.
So it's a double-edged sword. You might be able to talk farther because the skip is better, but you're also having a whole lot more disruption in your signals that you're trying to transmit. True, false, don't know.
So I'm going to be honest and say I'm not sure on that.
Okay, and I know I'm going deep into my reading here to remember. I'm pretty sure that ham radio operators trying, you know, because a lot of the hobby is how many people you talk to and how far away you talk to them and maintaining that log. And this gives them the ability to reach farther away and to increase their license count, right? So are you a licensed ham radio operator?
I am KE0 AOA technician level.
Okay.
There are different levels. One can go a higher up level to general and even to extra class, which is beyond that. But those are the three levels in a nutshell that you can test for.
When you got your license, did you have to do Morse code? Because I know you used to, you had to learn how to do Morse code. but I know that requirement has been dropped. Did you have to learn how to
No, I
code?
did not.
Okay. And don't have any desire to,
Not at this time.
but
Someday.
you
I
know
would
two
like to.
letters.
Someday I would like to, but right now I do
but-
not.
We all know two letters of Morse code, SOS, dot, 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 dash, 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 dot, dot, dot.
Everybody does know that.
We all know it, but that doesn't mean we can say it and make sense on the keypad. So, so what do you know about this antenna in front of us? Do you know the name of it, what these things are called? Anything else other than it's just a handheld antenna and you point it where you want it to go?
Yeah, you point it in the direction you want it to go, and I know that this one looks very fancy and it's very nice. But you can also make one out of a dowel rod and a coat hanger. I did not make such a thing, but my father-in-law has one that he has made at home.
And he loves using it
And
probably.
he loves using it. So, and I know that there's many other different kinds of antennas. There's some that are so expensive, I can't afford them, even, but and everything in between for all kinds of budgets, there's different wires that you can string up, maybe from one tree to your
My
station.
brother did that.
Yeah,
Yep.
so, and it all depends on your goals and what you're trying to do, and also your budget and your equipment setup and those things.
So
So,
it's just like astronomy. Different
Yeah.
telescopes do
Yeah.
different things
Yeah.
well.
your telescope, yeah.
And this could, now,
Yeah.
that's the handle down there. The transmitter hooks on down there. And the
And then you just-
beam
Yep.
is going out
That-
directional that way, right?
Yep,
Right.
And then you have a little connector right here for your radio. And so you just have your little radio wired into
And go do your
here.
thing.
Yep, do your
Go do
thing.
your thing.
And when we had our talk, Mitch had used this for a demonstration of a fox hunt. So he had a little transmitter hidden, not hidden, it was in plain sight, but nobody knew that it was there in the conference room.
Okay.
And then we just kind of handed the setup to gentlemen in the audience who volunteered, very nice of him. And he walked around and just kind of pointed this in different directions. And when he pointed in the direction of that device, it made a different noise. And so he was looking for which direction did that.
So it became a direction finder,
There you go.
right?
Yeah, and then he was able to very quickly, with no knowledge of where this thing was or what it looked like, probably in a minute or two tops, he had found it. And he
Cool.
walked over right to it,
Yeah.
and seen it. So,
Because it was just like, I'm imagining this in my head and it's going. He goes, oh, it's over there and he just keeps going until he finds it.
Keeps going.
Yeah. So,
so that was pretty cool.
awesome. Ham radio and astronomy are very complementary hobbies. I know a number of hams who do amateur astronomy as well. And there's a store, we have a new dealer down in Huntsville, Alabama called Gigaparts that is a ham radio operation beginning. And they were expanding their business and they identified astronomy as one of the things that really goes well with hams. And so they're now carrying astronomy gear from a Sports Scientific and a couple other dealers and doing very well with it. So it's an interesting, I wish I was seeing your talk. I was out here with Tim Russ and unable to hear your talk. I think it would have been fascinating to hear the talk that you keep mentioning Mitch. Who is Mitch? He's right over there. We're giving you a shout out, Mitch. If you want to come lean in so I can see your face, you can do that. The stage we have set up here is not conducive to a 3-person interview, but that's Mitch.
Mitch Cloud, and he's a counselor at Fairview Elementary School. And they were lucky enough to get a contact with the space station that they did. And Mitch and I did a presentation on it last year, and I believe the contact was May of last year. But it took a year of preparation, and it took even longer than that to get it even set up because of COVID. And so that delayed everything. But when I say it took a year to get set up, what I mean is that Mitch and the principal and the teachers had to take the kids through a curriculum of art. They got to kind of dress up as astronauts, I believe. There was a lot of learning about radios and antennas and the space station. So the whole STEAM spectrum was applied over the course of this year, where the kids got to apply all of this knowledge and do hands-on activities. And it all culminated at the end where they had everyone come in the auditorium. All of the news stations were there, families were there, their artwork was on display. Some of the kids were dressed up as astronauts and different things, and it was so cute. And they just got to queue up to the mic and they got to stand there and each one asked a question and then they just went to the end of the line and they kept going through until they lost contact with the space station.
7 minutes, something like
Yeah,
that.
it was-
Typically, it was a
not
good
very
pad.
long, but it was longer than the brief one that that you or I might get if we went outside and the ISS was out there
And just
today.
hailed them
Yeah,
as they went over.
yeah,
So-
because we wouldn't probably get too much opportunity for question because they get a lot of traffic
Right.
and they're not, they're
Well,
very. long.
everybody's out there trying to do the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Whereas
exactly.
those ones, they had a scheduled contact, so that was their space and time
It's an,
just for them.
it's an outreach by NASA to set up this so that they can do this and get the kids much more deeper inspired into, lots of different technologies
Yeah,
and education. So
definitely.
you're
Now,
not an educator, right?
Correct.
You are a,
I am a nurse practitioner, and right now I am the director of medical services for an outpatient mental health center, certified community behavioral health center out in Manhattan, Kansas.
that is a crying need in our society for mental health and behavioral health. I mean, thank you for doing that because it is a calling to be able to do that. It's like being an elementary school counselor. Not in my wheelhouse, it's not, but thank you for people that do that. And Mitch, and you as well do outreach out at the Powell Observatory, right?
Correct.
Mitch does,
More than I do because he is able to be there, and bless him for that. But he does a really great job with engaging with the crowds and with teaching and making the knowledge accessible, making the observatory accessible, because it's really easy for this kind of stuff to quickly go over your head.
right,
To the point where, you're just kind of giving the blank stare and you have disengaged. Mitch can bring it down to a level that is engaging, understandable, accessible. Anybody can understand what he's saying. And we can all follow along and get something out of that lesson.
Yeah.
And so I'm really appreciative of his time and dedication to that.
he's a showman and a ham too,
He is.
which makes it better. I saw the presentation last night and he did a great job warming up the audience.
And he does that every time he goes.
I can see that. He's very good at it. So I want to thank you for giving me a little bit of your time. And I want to thank Mitch for letting us use his antenna as a prop to try and put our eye out before he's trying to get out of here and we kept him here a little long.
Like I need safety goggles.
Well, I know, literally, I got one literally, what, 6-7 inches from it. You get the same boat
Yeah,
right there. At least I got glasses, so I probably won't poke myself in the eye, but you can poke yourself in the eye. Scott, we're gonna throw it back to you.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much. I started browsing ham radio equipment on the web while you were talking about all this. So I was going, maybe this is something I should get into. Anyways, I really appreciate it, Jena. Thank you, Kent. And thank you to the audience for tuning in. We'll be back with more Astronomical League Convention.
Thank you for having me.
Ben Shapiro is one of the most famous and skilled political debaters out there, and even if you're not into politics, his arguments are fun to watch. In this video, I want to explore why.